how it all started.
So I hope you enjoyed it. You'll feel much better in the morning. I met Juan Perros while working as a professor or teacher of arts for this project that was meant to be like an ecological project in this region, because they had a ecological catastrophe, and they were growing food for the cows to produce milk there, and they were drying the ponds. The pond you see at the beginning where Juan is swimming, those are very important and prehistorical ponds. So we went there to work with the kids and searching for garbage to produce a workshop like the one we did today in the morning here at Cinematheque, which is about recycling. I was trying to get to the municipal bin or trash bin, and then I found Juan. This is how I found him. He actually found me stealing his trash.
And how did you create a connection with him? Was it love at first sight, or did it take some time?
I think it was love at first sight. But then it also took a while to, like, for me to understand the man and to see if he was really like nuts or crazy, because this is how the town looked at him, like an outsider who is kind of, he has lost his mind or something. And I didn't believe this at the beginning, but then I thought, well, this guy might be affected, you know, by the attack. And then I realized, like, no, this guy is the most sincere guy I have ever met. And I decided to believe in him. This is what really happened. Like, to believe his narrative and his story and try to understand him, which is what doesn't happen in his town. Like, people don't do that. That's how he got the nickname Juan Perros. Juan Perros, the translation would be John Dogs. So he's like the last one in the social chain. He's the last dog in the pack. So,
And when you spoke a few days ago, you said that making the movie took 10 years, because actually in the beginning you didn't plan to make a movie. So maybe you can say something about that, how that happened.
So I didn't go to film studies. I studied visual arts, and my work was based in drawings and paintings. Still is, but back then was the only media I really knew. And then I met this guy, and I didn't know how to respond creatively, how to respond to the situation I was dealing with, because it was a very complex situation, and maybe making a drawing of Juan was really silly or stupid from my part. So eventually I went, I was going like every year to visit Juan through this project with kids, and eventually I got there and everything was burned. They had put fire into his land to get rid of him, and he had lost like everything, all his identities, all his papers, all his memories, everything. And this was the turning point where I decided to go forward and ask Juan, would you like to tell your story? And he said, yes, of course I want to tell my story. And then I said, okay, I'll be the medium, I'll help you. But first I have to go to Spain for 2 years because I had a scholarship for a master's degree. So I told the guy, okay, I'm gonna be back in 2 years and I'll be back with a camera. And that's exactly how we started. At the beginning, it was weird because when this first approach with the camera, I filmed 12 hours, went back to Mexico City, still cassettes. It was not a card. And when I downloaded all the material, I realized it was shit. Like, I cannot make something out of these because it's improperly shoot, doesn't have a good exposure, it's not properly composed, etc., etc. So I realized directors should not be camera operators. And through this process, I was starting to learn what is to build film narrative, or how to edit, or how to, you know, the technical and conceptual part at the same time. So it was like going to school. Like, in a way, I was learning by myself with my friends. I had friends that helped. And then I realized, well, we have to go back and shoot properly. So I got a photographer. He's a friend of mine. He's a climber, rock climbing. So he was like strong, and I said, this is the man. And we went there and filmed for 70 hours or 80 hours. And you may think like this is like, wow, what a great idea to have so much material. But it's actually a big problem, because then you have to like put everything together and get rid of a lot of stuff. So in a way it was like self-oriented education through the building of the film, and discovering what the film was about through the process of doing it. Eventually I said to myself, you have to go to film school, because you're an ignorant about film terms, you know, like what is a tilt, what is a... Yes, thank you. So I eventually went to this film school and took classes for 6 months in order to learn the basics. But I was already editing the film, and yeah, this took 9 years.
But there's something, I think, in the cinematography that's interesting, and maybe sometimes it's good to be ignorant because there's more intuition coming into place. I think there's something very intimate about the camera. So in a way, I was trying to process it with myself when I was watching it now, not for the first time, but there's something that you already mentioned about the height of the camera that's many times low, and you said that it's partly to glorify Juan Perros, but I was thinking about how it's also from the point of view of the animals.
It's a dog.
Yeah, so in a way you're kind of being one with the pack, and also the way the camera is not, it doesn't look too planned, but it also doesn't look gimmicky in a kind of like a dogma way, you know. It looks like it's almost trying to identify with the point of view of the character, but it's also like a second being, but not a second being in the sense of the documentary photographer that his presence is felt. So I think what's interesting about it is that you are felt as a stranger, but in a way you sometimes become one with the character, and that gives the feeling of it being a memoir. So he's not talking to you, it's kind of like almost talking to himself.
I love how Máin talks. Yeah. When Emiliano, who is the photographer of the film, asked me, what is my task? I said, I only have intentions. Like, I don't have specific tasks, but I know how we can film this guy. So the first thing I told him was, we need to go like low from the camera. We can't be high. So we can't be filming from 180 centimeters towards a 170 guy, you know, like he would be shrinked in the camera. So the first thing I thought was like, we have to make him look big. And since Emiliano is a climber, he said, yeah, like a mountain. And I said, yes, exactly like a mountain. So in a way, like you always see Juan against the landscape, like a huge thing. And I wanted this to be exactly like a part of the clan. Like, I'm the doggy that's following Juan. And this would be like what I think cinema or film should aspire to be, which is like a floating eye in the middle of reality and being an observer of what's going on without really judging, trying to be tender in the way of looking.
There's another interesting thing that I think is the concept of time, that you feel like his this habitat of him, and the way you film it, it makes it feel like it's completely out of time. It can be in the past, it can be in the future, some sort of dystopic future. And there's all these very precarious conditions of the wind and the storm, and it really gives a feeling of a place that's on one hand dangerous, almost like a Mad Max sort of thing, but on the other hand, it's very intimate and homey. You feel that it's home for him, so it's like a refuge from society that was not kind to him.
Yes, like I only had the strategies while filming, but then I thought the space or the place, this strange area full of animals and trash and natural landscapes, it's gonna save us. Like, I knew I didn't have like a properly developed language in film, but I knew the place was going to save us. And actually, this is what the movie does. Like, for me, it's always showing small details that are not in the front, but that are occurring. Like, every time I see the movie, I find new birds in the back, like, oh, there's a new bird there. And that for me was like the motive of the project, to get to portray not only this guy, but like this kind of reality in an intimate way, like a direct cinema. So we would film for hours until something happened. Hours. And then to get Juan to work, because filming a character or becoming a character is a lot of work. So if they ask you to do a documentary, you have to say, okay, how much are you going to pay me, Because you're doing tasks, you're doing homework, you're acting, you're performing. In a way, you're doing performance. It's not that he's acting, but I was asking the guy to walk towards some place, to do the water thing in some moment. And this was very interesting because we kind of created an alternative economy. I exchanged my time and my effort as being Juan to do his activities, like feeding the pigs, for example, and then he would give me some time to film him. So this was the economy that was, like, in the process, for me, that was the important part, not the result. It was more like an exchange of time.
So I think maybe it's a good time for you guys and girls to ask questions. I'm sure you have some.
So he has a family. His story, he tells at the end this tragic episode. This is related to his family. Like, I didn't want to tell this in the narrative of the film because this is dangerous for Juan. Like, he could have trouble in town. Because that's why I don't tell the story of who tried to kill him and why. Maybe in 10 years I'll make another big project and then I'll tell the end of the story, but not now. To make a resume for you guys, because you're curious about it, I would say Juan was born from a strange relation from his mother and father. The mother dedicated herself to trash and taught him the methods and ways to. And his father was like very active cultural character in town. So he would take Chaplin movies to town, he would do the circus, and they were very cult in this family, and they used to make music and poetry. And so Juan became this strange hybrid between a street boy and a highly educated boy. He dropped school by the age of 5. No, by the age of 10, I'm sorry, in 5th grade. Because he was very rebel. So all of these was for me identifying with him, you know. They killed the father of Juan to get the inheritance. Juan's brothers. He's the bastard son of this family. So his father recognized him, but the brothers didn't like it. So they said, oh, you know, he's going to keep the money of the family. We have to get rid of the dad, and then we have to get rid of Juan. And this is basically how it went. The soundtrack. There's actually no soundtrack, like there's no music, but all the sound design was made with a very close friend of mine. We studied primary school together. He didn't charge me anything because we didn't have any money. So we again was like exchanging time. And what we did, you actually see you hear the movie, and it's actually kind of natural. Like you're hearing the plays, but this is not how it goes. Technically, it's all post-produced. We have bases, of course, like how the wind was blowing, how the animal was barking, how, you know. But then you have to build something that is like complete and circular, and that's inventing everything. Like, not inventing, but if something falls, it's gonna sound like very strong. So we have to build, there are sequences that are completely built. Like there's no original sound. They put them together, 50, 70 channels of sound. The dog, the can, the donkey, Mr. Juan, the steps, so on. And then I realized that how did Hitchcock used to call this? The leitmotif. I don't recall the word, but the leitmotif was the whistling, because this is how he survives. So that was the music of my film, because it's a povera film. I cannot add other music or make it presumptuous. It was just the whistling that sort of made him stay alive. There was a question right there.
You answered to the thing, but we are running a time bank here in Jerusalem and in a few places without exchanging money. His way of living, it was a must, and then he has also his, I don't have the English, it's a view, it's more, it becomes more than living for to survive. It's like, it's also teaching us.
Like a manifesto.
And that's amazing.
Like a statement.
He survived.
I'll tell you a small story how he got there. Municipality told him, you're going to be in charge of the trash. And we're going to build the trash bin, the municipal trash bin, there. You're going to have a place to live, and you're going to have a bathroom, and you're going to have a payment. And then they declared all this area natural ecological reserve because of the ponds. And the government didn't do anything about Juan. Instead of saying, oh, you're going to be relocated in the new bin or the new trash place, they just left him there. What I think Juan responded was, you brought me here, and now you want to take me out of here. You know what? This is my land. I'm staying. So yeah, it's a political statement. Very intimate.
but it's more than politic. It's teaching us a very human way to live.
Yes, this is
They
why
were
I,
like animals to him, the people, and he's saying that in the film, that the only enemy that people have is people,
Mhm.
the human being. But more than survival is showing a way that you can survive, you can lead Gaber,
Mhm.
and in a beautiful way.
Mhm.
It's
Re-
like he's busy with, he's working with garbage, but it's
I would say Juan is very resilient. And I don't know if I'm too fast in this, but the thing we really learned about him or from him and that we wanted to reflect was how he is at the same time transcendent and humble. Radically humble.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like this alternative ecosystem that I think that's also what you were trying to imply, that you know how he feeds the animals and there's a circle of life and death, and when the animal dies another animal eats it, which for us was like, can't look at this, but it's like this part of this you know, this beautiful ecosystem, and you know the thing that is discarded becomes either the food or the furniture or the shelter, or and there's nothing wasted, and then he takes things, he gives them, and then he gets the food back to the animals.
It's incredible how humankind can create capital out of nothing. And this guy really does that. Yes.
Do you think he's a sad man, Juan?
Lisa?
Is he a sad man?
A sad man.
In your eyes.
That's a very good question. I think art, in a way, is a way to deal with pain also. Like, this is a theme in art. And it's been very, not painful, but very hard to manage, because it's not what you see here in the screen. Juan is my friend, and we talk by phone, and sometimes he needs help, and I send some money or do something for him, and we're like a family or close friends. He've had some hard periods. He told me this beautiful story. I'm going to resume it. One day I was so sad that I wanted to die. I just wanted to lay down and die. I was not able to put any more effort into my pack. And then a cat came with a bird, and he put the bird on my chest. And I said to myself, oh, the cat cares about me, and I have a responsibility towards him. This, I don't know why I didn't include it in the film, but yesterday I reminded myself about this story. So yeah, he has complex days. This desert is very hard. Like, you can have 45 degrees during the day, and you can have -5 during the night. So that when January strikes, it's cold. Like, inside your bone, you're cold. So you don't actually see it, but parts of the movie were filmed in this time, and we were wrapping Juan after every sequence and embracing him to get him some. But I think besides being sad or happy, I think he's teaching us a happy way of living. But what I think it's important is his capacity to resist and to transform and adapt and be elastic about what is happening.
I was wondering if he did see the movie and how he reacted to it.
Great question. Before coming to Israel, actually Máin is responsible for having me here. She made everything possible in Mנופים and Art Cube. But 2 weeks after coming to Israel, I went to show the film to Juan. And first we did a private screening for him. I rented a very humble house with a garden, and we built a cinema in the garden. A very poor cinema, like, not like this, you know, like a very humble one. And we made this screening for him. And when the movie ended, Juan was like, "Oh, muy bonito," like very nice, you know. And I was like, "Juan, you have to give me more. Like, I've been here for 9 years. You gotta give me more, you know." And he said something that I just love this guy. He said, "Oh, you know, I love to see my donkey." Because the donkey was killed in a road, hit by a car, 5 years ago. When that happened, Juan called me and said, "Pinto died," and he cried for 10 minutes. So for him, the most precious part of the film was not looking at himself, but looking at his donkey. He was his best friend.
So how does he have money to survive? I mean, he's just selling junk and he gets money, or he gets salary still from the government?
No, he doesn't have a salary. And since the trash is not being thrown where he is, now he has to go to every trash bin in town to collect. So now that I went to present the film, and I didn't end the story, but now I will end it, I was filming him doing this. Because eventually, it might be useful, you know? His life is evolving, and the film is evolving. The end of the story about presenting the film was we presented it in a big auditorium, and we made a free exhibition of the film, so everybody came. And people were very touched. Like, by the end of the question and answer session, everyone was crying, including myself. Except Juan. Juan resisted and was answering with a very proper voice, you know. He didn't want to go. He doesn't like crowded places. So I had to like really push on him, you know, like, "Juan, I've been doing you favors for 9 years, and I'm asking you for 1. And he couldn't oppose. So then people asked him to make the answers. And I asked him to step in, and he did it. And I think this was, for me, this was the main purpose of the film since the beginning, or the project. I wouldn't call it film, just. And the purpose was to give him the voice he doesn't have, and the chance to have a dialogue with a community that is not listening to him because he's discarded. So I think we made it.
Yeah, they changed their attitude towards it?
Totally. They were very... First, there were a lot of people were surprised by Juan because they were like, "Oh, I live here since 15 years ago and I didn't know that Juan lives here." Because you don't see them. You don't see Juan. And Juan Perros, there are Juan Perros in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv and in every city in the world there are people like this. And you don't usually see them. And when you see them... Shadows. And when you see them, they become shadows. You don't take really care to say, "Hello, how are you, good morning," or whatever, you know. So for me, it was this position to put the thing the other way around. Like the history of art, like the history of portrait in art, it's about portraying the kings and the powerful people. And I wanted to revert this, you know, to put it the other way around and make it useful for him, not for me. And so I think we made it like it's useful for him now because he has a new position in town. So they see him and they're like, "Oh, Juanito, you're in the film industry now." You know, like people are proud of him. He made it to the films.
What's the name of this little town here?
The name of the town is Cuatro Ciénegas, 4 ponds. That would be the translation. It's in the north of Mexico, from Mexico City to the US, it would be 12 hours, and this is 10 hours away. So it's really close to the border. And it's the most beautiful place I have ever known. So maybe this was the first engagement. Before Juan, I was engaged with the place. Like, it's a beautiful place because it's a desert in the middle of a valley. And it's an old sea that was trapped during Pangea. So these ponds have marine-like conditions from that time. This is why they're so important. So it's also a metaphor of the place, the movie.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.